Part 22. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 211. Gretel finished speaking in one breath, spread his hands, and leaned back on the chair. Archmage Carlyle looked at his calm look and felt a headache everywhere, from his eyebrows to his temples. Other low-level magicians came to him to apply for projects, or sought his help to apply for projects from the council, and all of them looked frightened. Gretel was better, with a face full of "I tried my best, do whatever you want, that's it anyway." This means that Greet did not find the sealing material and did not have a sphygmomanometer. Otherwise, if you take a blood pressure monitor and measure it, Your Excellency the Archmage's diastolic and systolic blood pressure will conservatively be estimated to have increased by 30 mmHg. Archmage Carlyle raised his hand and rubbed his temples. He leaned back and placed the thumbs of his clasped hands against each other, circling back and forth. After turning for a while, he raised his chin and nodded at the paper in front of him. "You want to apply for a project? Then let me ask you, how many magicians do you need for this project, and at what level?" "I don't know. But, at least, there must be several level 5 or above." He couldn't do anything with current, vacuum, or magic array. There are no mages below level 5 working in the force field hall that restrains lightning at the Thunder Horn. It is estimated that the same will be true for this project. What facilities and materials do I need to apply for in the Mage Tower? I don't know. I don't even know what facilities are available in the Mage Tower. I only took a look at the force field hall at Thunderhorn from a distance. How long will the project last and how much funding will it cost? I don't know. Greet spread his hands. If this is a national natural science or something, he can slowly calculate what instruments, consumables, and funding are needed when writing a project application. But here, he doesn't know how much subsidy a 5th level mage should receive for a day's work. You don't know anything, how do you act like it's natural?" Master Carlyle endured it again and again, and finally swallowed his complaints. Gretel cannot be blamed for this situation. In fact, just to prevent such a thing from happening, the teacher arranged for himself to directly connect with Gretel and protect him anytime and anywhere. Generally speaking, if a magician in the council can take a 5th level mage on a mission, he himself is at least a level 7, or even a level 9 or higher mage. He will experience these problems one by one as he grows up. Some of them he has never encountered before will also be asked by his connections. There will never be a situation where he doesn't have what he wants or doesn't know what he asks. But Gretel is a special case. His ideas cannot match his upgrade speed, but is this Gretel's fault? Is it? Not to mention the half-finished paper in hand, there are hundreds of mages who have been stuck in the alchemy room day and night to verify the pile that Greet threw out earlier. Archmage Carlyle inhales, exhales, and calms down. He looked at Gretel seriously. "If you don't know these and still want to continue this project, you have two ways to go. First, estimate the number of people, facilities, materials needed, and invite magicians. I can help you with these. But you need to apply for the report yourself. Submit it, and you will be responsible for the progress of the entire project. Of course, the project results are entirely yours, and all rewards will be distributed by you." Greet shook his head vigorously. "Are you kidding me? A group of magicians above level 5 are being commanded by him. Not to mention whether people listen to him or not, he can't even understand when people are messing with force fields and stuff." Seeing Greet's eyes widening and shaking his head like a fan, Archmage Carlyle finally felt a little more comfortable. He smiled slightly. "The second way is to cooperate with Thunderhorn. You come up with projects and ideas." He nodded at the paper in front of him. "Thunderhorn provides the manpower and everything else. But then, you can't have all the results of the entire project dash." "That's it," Gretel couldn't wait to answer. Archmage Carlyle was stunned for a moment, then the proportion. Whatever. Just let me finish it in the end. By the way, leave me a small set of equipment that I can operate myself. Let me try electrolysis. Archmage Carlyle. No, I still want to talk to you about the share ratio. The most I can give you is 40%. Well, if you really insist, 50% is not non-negotiable. After all, so many people can't work in vain. Greet was already so happy that he was almost floating. He didn't want to follow up on this project at all, including the anode material ratio, reaction temperature, voltage, and current intensity. He was not a metallurgist. Not a material expert either. There are so many dwarves waiting for him to play in the forging field, no, waiting for him to think of ways to do physical examinations and collect data one by one. What does he have to do with electrolytic metallurgy? For such a troublesome experimental project, we must decisively pass the blame to the Magic Council. Archmage Carlyle shook his head and smiled bitterly. He sent Greet out, took the paper with him, and went to the Tower of Babel to find the legendary mage in person. Teacher, that Greet made something strange again. Well, let me see. Master Deckard took the paper, flipped through it, and touched his chin. He really couldn't help but not pay attention. To the Magic Council, the importance of metals like mithril cannot be overemphasized. This metal is half lighter than steel, yet harder than steel, and has good ductility and magic conductivity. It is one of the best materials for making magic equipment and outlining magic arrays. If possible, the Magic Council would like to use a mixture of fine gold and mithril to attack a few more airships. The high-level magicians would like to each have a mithril soft armor. Dream. Even the legendary mage can't make one. Bounties in the direction of smelting and increasing production are hung there all year round. The magicians rushed forward heroically in batches, and retreated miserably in batches. Some people only got the ore and broke their own fingers by forging iron. Some people successfully established a relationship with the dwarves, got the semi-finished products from mithril smelting, added acid and alkali, heated them and made various tossings, but they couldn't produce any flowers. Some high-level mages had a very good relationship with dwarves, and were able to observe the smelting process of divine magic, and correctly judged that it was electricity, and went back to use electricity to chop the semi-finished products themselves. He chopped horizontally, vertically, and in different ways, but finally he struck a lonely person. But Gretel's paper, Master Descartes, could see at a glance that it was an idea and method that had never appeared before. How many people can you draw? Forget it, including you, draw enough people to come to me to do it. On the 375th floor of Babel Tower, rooms 3, 4, and 5 are given to you. 12 hours a day. Teacher, 12 hours? Deduct 8 hours of sleep a day, and then deduct the time for eating and taking care of yourself, and there will be nothing left. Does he have it? His disciples and grandchildren may not be able to bear it? How? We people from the plasticity department may not be able to mix mithril or powder and make it into a thin stick. Archmage Carlyle gave up decisively, shrank back, and changed the topic to another direction. The legendary mage scratched the stubble on his chin. That makes sense. In this case, I'll go find that old guy from the transformation department and get his people to do it together. By the way, you also said that Gretel wants a small room and makes something by himself. That's right, but can he do it? He's only level 2. And he can't even play with force fields. Give it to him. In room 6, go and arrange the things, and send an apprentice to watch over him. Keep him safe at all times. A legendary mage spoke up. When Gretel arrived at the Tower of Babel 3 days later, he saw that research facilities, research materials, and researchers were all in place. Mages wearing various robes were rushing back and forth in the force field room. A tall magician was holding a form and kept shouting. The heating temperature rises another 10 degrees, and the third experiment begins. The heating temperature remains unchanged, the current output is increased by 1%, and the fifth experiment begins. Mithril rod number 3, the second experiment begins. The corresponding group of mages is responsible for the operation. Adjust the burning array, adjust the electric field, and replace the mithril rod. Electric currents pierced, and the force field was filled with heat waves. Within 10 steps, no one could step in. Gretel stood there for 3 seconds and then stepped back step by step until he reached the door and was blocked by Archmage Carlyle. Is this plan the same as your design? Do you think there is anything that needs to be changed? Gretel was sweating drop by drop on his forehead. Maybe it was because of the heat, but he was still a little nervous after seeing such a big scene. He searched hard and squeezed out the little physical and chemical knowledge he had left, and finally came up with something. The voltage may be too high. Although I don't remember what the metallurgical voltage is, I seem to have some impression that the applied voltage is lower than the decomposition voltage of molten salt. That number is very small, it seems to be only 2 digits. Archmage Carlyle took his words very seriously. Make 2 strokes on the notebook and immediately raise your voice. Garrett. Make the electricity smaller. Smaller. Hey, it's not about the current. It's about the voltage. 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 What is that? How to measure it? There is a voltmeter. Greet swallowed the word silently. This involves positive and negative charges, ions in compounds, etc. It can't be explained clearly in a sentence or two. The technology in this world has not yet reached atoms, ions, and electrons. What should I say? Or could Alessandro Volta be summoned? May I? If that doesn't work, you can give me a simple voltmeter specially designed for electricians. Greet scratched his head, expressing his inability to do anything. He can only contribute one more thing. I only know how to make the voltage smaller. He asked for Master Carlyle's notebook, brushed a few strokes, and drew several simple current diagrams. In a series circuit, the current on a loop is equal everywhere, and the sum of the voltages at both ends of each load is equal to the total voltage. In a parallel circuit, the voltages at both ends of the parallel branches are equal, and the current flowing through the main circuit is equal to the sum of the currents in each branch, or you can consider using resistors to reduce the voltage. I can only do so much. He threw away the pen and paper and ran away happily, rushing into the laboratory assigned to him. The power supply, wires, carbon rods, etc. were all ready. Greet opened the space bag, took out the beaker, flask, water tank, and test tube one by one, set them up, put distilled water, and refined salt. Gurgling, gurgling, gurgling. The cathode and the anode, the ends of the 2 carbon rods, bubbled out one after another. In one of the glass tubes, yellow-green gas flows into the lime milk, and the milky white liquid in the water tank slowly becomes clear to the naked eye. Gretel took a breath of joy. The cold and stimulating smell rushed into the nose, and a sense of security suddenly filled the limbs. 84 disinfectant. My liver finally came out. 3,000 words, I will update another 3,000 words in the evening, and I will finish the reward and add more updates. Thanks to Etienne Guiron for the reward of 6,666 book coins. Group number 649136249, everyone is welcome to chat. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, and ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 212. Greet was so happy that he almost flew up. Disinfectant water. Disinfectant water. There are various clinical disinfection measures, such as alcohol, iodophor, high temperature and high pressure, ultraviolet rays, but the cheapest is a large bowl, and the only thing that doesn't hurt if you splash it everywhere is disinfectant. In hospitals and operating rooms, the smell of disinfectant wafts around every day. If you can't smell the smell and perform surgery, you always feel a sense of insecurity. It feels even more unsafe than wearing less clothes. After all, it is common for your pants to fall off during surgery, and the circulating nurse may not always help you lift them. It is absolutely impossible for the operating room to not be disinfected after being used for one day. Gretel had long wanted to get out the disinfectant. However, he only knows how to electrolyze salt water to obtain chlorine gas, and pass chlorine gas into lime water to obtain disinfectant water. However, electrolysis of salt water uses direct current, but he only knows about alternating current. How does alternating current become direct current? Sorry, I don't know. Now, thanks to the research mission of the Magic Council, Gretel finally has ready-made electricity to use. No, he can use it openly. It's not in vain that he throws out the electrolytic smelting plan. Metallurgy is nothing. That thing has nothing to do with him. Disinfectant is what is urgently needed right now. Proper disinfection in operating rooms and wards can save many lives. Gretel didn't know whether this thing that was restrained by a force field and made sparks fly was a direct current or an alternating current. But since the electrolysis of salt water is successful, it should probably be direct current. He worked hard and made 2 large buckets of disinfectant in one go. His arms became weak while carrying the buckets, and then he breathed out with satisfaction. That's enough for now. It's not good if you make too much of this stuff. If you put it in a space bag, who knows whether it will evaporate or not. By the way, it's best to take out the bleaching powder together. The last time there was an outbreak of dysentery in Heartland City, if there was bleaching powder, why would there be any trouble? Just push the bleaching powder over. Gretel rolled up his sleeves and continued working. Preparing bleaching powder is not difficult. It is nothing more than calcium hydroxide, that is, slaked lime produced by heating quicklime. Add a little water and stir it into lime milk, and pass chlorine gas through it. What, you said there is too much chlorine and you are afraid it will be poisonous if it is not used up? Connect another pipe and continue to transport lime water, adding another bucket of disinfectant water. Most of the laboratories in the Tower of Babel have no windows leading to the outside of the tower, at least Greet's laboratory does not. He worked in the dark for a whole day before he was satisfied and returned to rest with 3 large buckets of disinfectant water and a large bottle of bleaching powder. As soon as he left, the 5th level mage Aurora Warden, who was sitting paralyzed in the corner, immediately jumped up like an electric shock and rushed to the experimental table. Aurora Warden is the youngest disciple of Archmage Carlyle. As a mere 5th level mage, he can become a disciple of a 14th level Archmage. His qualifications can be imagined. In fact, Aurora Warden has been going smoothly since she entered the profession, and is called a genius boy by the people around her. Leave the students of the same period far behind. It only took him 5 years to learn from reading books and become an apprentice to advance to the 5th level mage. He is only 20 years old this year. I have never encountered any obstacles along the way. Even though I have been locked up in the Mage Tower for 5 years, reading and doing research, and never been allowed to venture out on adventures, I have successfully passed the first major stage. In the past 5 years, he has also published several good papers and improved several new magics. He is now a 3rd ring arcanist. Among the young mages of the same age, everyone praised him as the future archmage, and even the seed of a legendary mage. This talented young man had just recently come to a realization and plunged into the laboratory, planning to merge the Ethereum prison and the electric shock ring to create a new magic. In the middle of his work, he was suddenly pulled out of the laboratory by the teacher and worked as a bodyguard for a 2nd level magician. Aurora Warden? I'm not going, teacher. I've only just improved my magic halfway. Go. Archmage Carlyle just waved his hand and carried him out of the laboratory with his transparent force field hand. Teacher won't harm you. Don't look at the fact that this mage is only level 2, He is a 4th level Arcanist. 4th level. He is 3 years younger than you. If you have a good relationship with such a person, there will be many benefits in the future. Aurora Warden was just thrown over. Only after I came here did I find out that the senior brothers, senior sisters, their disciples, and the mages under their supervision, as long as they could spare some time and had enough spell levels, were all locked up in the 3 laboratories next door, doing experiments to the death. I heard from my senior brothers and sisters that the experiments in the large sheets were all designed by the little mage I was guarding. Aurora Warden especially wanted to go there. However, it was impossible. He squatted alone in the corner of room 6, brushing Gretel's mage armor and protective arrows every half a day, and brushing his protective energy every 50 minutes. In addition, he is always ready to use his power field to drag Gretel out of danger. However, the experimental process was smooth sailing without any twists and turns. I could only hear the boom, bang, and pop of sparks and lightning from the next room. It was calm here in Laboratory 6, and all the protective measures were not used even once. From morning to night, he only saw the young mage busy, moving shelves, moving sinks, pouring water, pouring magic materials. He secretly threw away the magic materials and found that they were just some salt and lime. Completely unremarkable. However, Greet used the salt and lime to make something that he had no idea what it was, and the identification technique could not give an answer at all. Aurora Warden became curious. But Gretel didn't talk to him, and he was too embarrassed to take the initiative to ask, so he could only squat in the corner and watch with wide eyes. The experiment is not difficult, and Greet's movements are not very fast. You can understand it after watching it once, and you can become proficient after watching it twice. After watching it 3 times, I will definitely be able to do better than him. At the beginning of the 3rd time, Aurora Warden had no other tasks except seizing the time to brush up spell protection for Gretel at regular intervals. Extremely boring. Boredom and curiosity combined. After Greet left, he took out the alchemy equipment he had brought with him and got on the experimental table himself. Isn't it just table salt? Isn't it just to put electricity in? Hey, there are no ready-made graphite rods. Go next door and get 2. Aurora Warden quickly set up the experimental bench. Soon, bubbles began to bubble on the graphite rod. The bubbles on both sides are different colors. One side is colorless and transparent, the other side is light yellow-green. Aurora Warden waited patiently for a while, first collected 2 bottles of yellow-green gas, put them aside for later use, and then tossed the 2 colorless and transparent bottles. I threw the identification technique up, but there was no information. To detect toxicity and throw it up, it will show that it is not poisonous. Open it and smell it, there is no smell. Throw a freeze ray on it, but there will be no change. Throw the spark technique up. Boom. An unprecedented violent explosion. Fortunately, Aurora Warden had quick eyesight and set up a shield in time, so she was not injured by the sparks, air waves, and exploding glass fragments. He broke out in a cold sweat on the spot. When he regained consciousness and looked again, he saw that the experimental platform was in a mess, as if it had been swept by a hurricane. Bottle. The graphite rod is crooked. The glass sink had a crack, and half of the salt water in the sink had gurgled out. There are also the 2 bottles of gas that were set aside in advance. The bottles and caps have been broken into several pieces. The yellow-green gas in the bottles is rising, getting thinner and thinner. I haven't figured out what that is yet. Aurora Warden felt anxious. She first supported the experimental table, lowered her head and took a strong sniff. Greet remembered that there was still an experiment to be done. When he turned back, what he saw was the scene of chaos. Aurora Warden fell to the ground, clutching her chest and curling up into a ball. The experimental platform was like a typhoon passing by. The table and floor were shiny, with water stains and broken glass everywhere. Help people. He was so angry that he shouted at the top of his lungs. Then, he opened the force field access control of the laboratory and rushed in. Take a step forward, brake suddenly, return, jump out the door, and cast a bubble spell on yourself. I said, why did the person fall? This smell inside, this is chlorine. Save people. Greet shouted again, rushed in with the help of the bubble technique, and struggled to drag the person out. After 2 steps, the surrounding laboratories opened their doors one after another, and the magicians rushed out one after another. Gretel didn't even raise his head. While observing the patients, he shouted to them. Don't come in yet. Blow the air out of the room. Blow it out of the mage tower. The air is poisonous. A long wind howled past. The high-level mage's wind-making technique was much stronger than the one released by Gretel, and the strong wind caused a dull pain on his body. Greet removed the bubble technique, and sure enough, he could no longer smell the chlorine gas. He breathed a sigh of relief, put down the patient, and continued to command. Go call the high-level healer. Bring a new sink. Put clean water in it and add a little bit of caustic soda, only a little bit. Insert the graphite rod again, perform electrolysis, and collect the gas coming out of the graphite rod. Quick. As he spoke, his eyes quickly looked at Aurora Warden up and down. Severe cough, pink frothy sputum, obvious cyanosis of nails, lung damage and hypoxia are obvious symptoms. It is conservatively estimated to be moderate chlorine poisoning. I hope I don't get pulmonary edema now. If that happens, I won't be able to save it with my treatment. He quickly turned Aurora Warden onto her back, tilting her head back to open her airway. Then he lowered his head and shouted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Open your mouth. Open wider. Aurora Warden struggled to open her mouth. Gretel raced against time to throw a flash spell in, and looked at the light source. No, the larynx was already swollen, and if it continued to progress, the larynx would become swollen by the minute. He hesitated for half a second between direct intubation and tracheotomy, and quickly took out everything. As he dug out, he stared into Aurora Warden's eyes and spoke loudly. I said it to the patients, but also to the mages present. You're poisoned. The trachea dash. Greet stretched out his hand and made a faint stroke on the patient's throat. It's already swollen. If it gets any bigger, you won't be able to breathe in, and you'll be suffocated. If you agree, I can cut a little bit below your throat and insert a tube to let you breathe. Don't be afraid, it won't cut the blood vessels. It can be cured by treating minor injuries. If you don't agree, I'll use healing skills to help you hold on, but I'm only a second-level priest. I don't know how long I can hold on, and whether high-level healers can catch up. If you agree with Che, just tell me, or nod. Aurora Warden neither nodded nor shook her head. His fingers twitched and trembled, trying hard to grab his throat, but his lips could no longer make a sound. There was a lot of bustle inside and outside the room. Some people were tidying up the experimental table, some were running out to ask for help, and some were rushing over to form a group, staring at Aurora Warden, who fell to the ground with worried expressions on their faces. A tall silver-haired magician stood out from the crowd and said loudly. Cut him open. What? Cut it open. I am the teacher's disciple, I will be responsible. Greet looked up. The silver-haired magician stared into his eyes and nodded solemnly. Gretel took a deep breath. Don't be afraid, don't move. Throw him a paralysis spell. Don't let him move. The spell was thrown over in response. Aurora Warden froze on the spot. Gretel lowered his head, clasped his hands together, held a small seed in his palms, and prayed silently. Tracheal intubation. Grow it for me. The green swaying, hollow, soft, smooth, yet tough vine snaked out from Greet's palm. Then came the expert and skillful operations of the emergency doctor, disinfecting the skin with alcohol, sterilizing the knife, incising the skin, separating the pretracheal tissue with the magician's hand retractor, and flashing the knife. Vine version of endotracheal intubation, smooth entry. No more chicken bones thankfully. Over there, are you okay? 3,000 words, another update today, there will be another update tomorrow. Thanks at ==wg for the reward of 1,666 book coins. Thanks to at cuteness is enough for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to at book friend 201804011833379969 for the reward of 100 starting coins. You win. Okay, I will add another chapter tomorrow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 213. Chapter 213 Oxygen inhalation relies on electrolyzed water. After the endotracheal intubation was completed and fresh air entered the airway, Aurora Walton's expression suddenly softened. The hands that were grabbing at his throat relaxed and he let out a steady sound of airflow in his airway. When Greed helped him up again and asked him to sit upright and breathe, he could actually sit still. The most tense and fatal hurdle has passed. Greed breathed a sigh of relief and began to urge. Is the experimental bench ready? Whether it is mild, moderate, or severe chlorine poisoning, oxygen treatment is an important treatment method. The problem is, Gretel doesn't have pure oxygen in his hands. The so-called temporary ear piercing in a sedan chair, he could only wait for it to be used while directing the magicians to electrolyze water on the spot. Not only command, but also tell them how to test. The gases coming out of the two graphite rods are different. Remember to check. When one is lit, it will have a blue flame, and if you put the wood chip in the other, the flame will suddenly become very big. I want the one with the bigger flame. Collect a bottle and bring it to me quickly. It's not that troublesome. The silver-haired magician who decided to let him do chi-chi turned around, raised his hand from a distance, and threw the two identification skills. This is it. Fire energy. Collect a bottle and send it over. Gretel. So it's been several months and you haven't given it a name yet? But it's not a big deal. Whether it's the energy of fire or the energy of life, you can call it whatever you want. Just give me a bottle of pure oxygen quickly, name it, etc., you can do whatever you want. He wiped it on his waist and took out a big stick, a copper tube-style stethoscope. It's good to have a space bag. You can carry all these necessary equipment with you, Mom. I have moist rowels in both lungs. Fortunately, it's not diffuse, and it's not considered severe chlorine poisoning. Even so, it's best to get him oxygen quickly. Is everything okay over there? Not yet. It's only half a bottle. The speed at which oxygen is produced is quite annoying. But Gretel didn't want to interfere too much. The main reason was that he didn't know if increasing the voltage or current would improve the oxygen production efficiency or blow up the oxygen production tank first. He could only rely on himself and work hard. He first performed a therapeutic technique on the patient's lungs. There seemed to be no reaction. Another one? Another one? After taking 5 treatment of minor injuries shots at once, the wet crackles under the stethoscope finally became lighter and seemed to be turning into dry crackles. Greet already felt faintly dizzy and his temples were swollen. He knew that he had cast too many spells in a short period of time. He didn't dare to use the healing technique anymore, so he took back the stethoscope, took it out, and threw out a lot of things. Dwarf version of the ventilator. I'd better forget about the bucket and the mask for now. I'll just make do with the air pump and the rubber tube. The magicians gathered in a group stretched their necks and watched curiously, but they did not dare to get closer than 2 meters for fear of disturbing Greet's treatment. Only a magician came running over from the experimental table. Okay. This is the first bottle. You use it first. Okay, Greet responded, calculating quickly. The air pump is relatively large, and the volume of the oxygen bottle is about half of the air pump, at most 60%, right? It's not bad, anyway. In this case of high-flow oxygen inhalation, the oxygen volume fraction is at most 70%, so pure oxygen cannot be used. Then the next step is. He pointed at the air pump of the ventilator and shouted. Someone help me transfer the gas here. 5 or 6 hands stretched out like a forest, and there was a stalemate for a moment. The magician squatting in the middle knocked off the hands of his companions with a pop, 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 and took 2 steps forward. Me. I major in wind. It's you. Hurry. Gretel simply handed him a bottle of oxygen. He reached out to pick up the tracheal intubation tube and tapped on the end of the soft vine. The vine stretched, expanded, wrapped around one end of the rubber tube, and quickly tightened. After finishing here, the wind magician over there happened to finish. All right. You wait here. Wait for the next bottle to be transferred. Greet ordered him, and his hands began to push and pull, pushing and pulling, pushing the air pump like a clinical ball. Chlorine poisoning and oxygen treatment are matters of emergency medicine or respiratory medicine. He has only read a few papers. It seems that the oxygen flow rate should be 50 L/min. Damn it! Not enough oxygen. Has the fire-burning energy healed? Hurry up! Hurry up! Hurry up! Coming, coming, coming. The experimental bench promised repeatedly and sent 3 bottles of gas in one go. Gretel looked up in his busy schedule and saw that they had opened 4 water tanks at the same time, surrounding the force field power supply in them, and started electrolysis together. Okay, anyway, I just want the results. With a steady supply of pure oxygen, and with Gretel pushing the air pump at a constant speed and continuously supplying oxygen, the patient's condition actually began to improve little by little. The cyanosis on my lips and nails faded little by little, and my chest tightness and shortness of breath began to lessen. After about half an hour, I no longer need to sit upright to breathe and can lie down with a calm expression. Archmage Carlyle rushed over at this moment. He accompanied a great magician and hurried in. As soon as they entered, the 2 of them were shocked by the scene in front of them. You can still understand it while lying on the ground, but what does it mean to have a tube in your neck? Is there a pump connected to the pipe? Still pushing and pushing? What are you doing? How is the poisoned person doing? The great magician stepped forward and waved his hand, and milky white light rain fell down. It was the healing technique that Gretel was all too familiar with. Greet looked up and was overjoyed. His lungs are injured. Treat the lungs. Treat the lungs. Leave that tube alone. I'll take care of it. The great magician was stunned. He knelt down and looked at Aurora Walton, who was lying flat on the ground, and then at Greet. Greet's face was flushed with exhaustion, and his hand pushed the air pump at a constant speed, not daring to pause for a moment. The great magician looked at his movements carefully, then raised his eyes and paused for a moment on his magician badge. 4th Reincarnation, 2nd level magician? The little guy who has become famous recently? I did hear that he was a healer. By the way, what's his name? Gret Nordmark. Greet nodded vigorously. The great magician pondered for a moment, then pressed his palm on the patient's left chest, and dots of white light flew and penetrated into the chest. The light spots are thick, soft, and not dazzling. It can be seen that it is from the hands of a great healer. Greet took a peek and saw that the golden stars on the great magician's badge were flashing, 1, 2, 3. A level 13 Great Magician. Level 13, a boss in the conjuration and medical branches. This surgical treatment is really beautiful. He let go of the air pump, letting it fall on the translucent floating dish, and raced against time to take out the stethoscope. Press your left lung and listen carefully. Normal breath sounds. This healing technique is too powerful. The left lung is cured. The right lung. The conjuration master looked at Gretel in surprise. He relied on his sense of the breath of life to determine that his left lung was healed. What did this child rely on? That pipe? How did you know? Then, listen to the breathing sounds, they are different on both sides. Gretel generously handed him the stethoscope, cut off the endotracheal tube himself, and removed the attached air pump. Now that one lobe of the lung has been cured, there is no need to continue giving oxygen. More ventilation is not good. After the man of the spell department listened to the breathing sounds on both sides, he stretched out his hand to press on the patient's right chest. Gretel squatted next to him and pointed at the patient's throat. He also has a problem here. His throat is extremely swollen and he can't breathe in. Master, please heal his throat. Once cured, I can extubate him. The man of the spell department looked at him deeply, touched the patient's throat lightly with his fingers, closed his eyes for a moment, and threw down another healing spell. Gretel confirmed that the laryngeal edema had disappeared, moved forward, and held the endotracheal tube in both hands. Shrink, recover. The tender green vines sway gently. Inch by inch, it was pulled out of the patient's trachea and reduced to a seed in Greet's hand. Okay, okay. I'll do the next one. The great magician had already raised his hand, then put it down gently. He looked at Gretel curiously with a look that said, I want to see why you dare to fight with me. Greet smiled at him, lowered his head, and pointed at the patient's neck from a distance of 7 or 8 centimeters. Treat minor injuries. The trachea is healed first, and then the mage's hand is moved to return the pulled tissue in front of the trachea to its original position. Guide a ball of healing energy to brush over it, healing minor injuries during the stretching process, healing the subcutaneous tissue layer by layer. Heal your skin. Perfect. The great magician's eyes narrowed slightly. After Greet finished everything, he handed him a badge. Your treatment method is interesting. My name is Galen Novak. If you are interested in exchanging treatment techniques, you can come to me on the 75th floor of the Conjuration Tower. Hey, Archmage Carlyle shouted dissatisfied. Novak laughed. Okay, let's talk later. I have a lot of things to do, and you pulled me over halfway. Little Gretel, come and play when you have time. He waved his sleeves and walked away. Archmage Carlyle stood up and sent him out. As soon as he returned to the laboratory, he set his sights on Gretel. What happened? As he went back and forth, the silver-haired magician who stood up before, the chief disciple of Archmage Carlyle, had already completed the clearance. The magicians from other rooms who came out to watch the fun, the transformation magicians who were working as part of the experiment, and the disciples who were working as assistants were all invited out. In laboratory number 6, only the direct disciples of Archmage Carlyle and Greet, who was busy taking care of Aurora Warden, were left. Archmage Carlyle had no scruples when questioning him. What happened? How could Warden be poisoned? In the opinion of Archmage Carlyle, it was probably because something went wrong during Gretel's experiment, and his disciple stepped forward to save people regardless of his own safety. Otherwise, how can we explain that the second-level mage was safe and the fifth-level mage was knocked down instead? However, he sent Warden here to act as a bodyguard. Even if the disciple was injured, Greet could not be blamed too much. At most, I can use this as an excuse to persuade Gretel not to do any experiments that are too dangerous. Unexpectedly, Gretel's face was calm, without any hint of shame. Instead, my little disciple trembled, lowered his head and muttered. "It's my fault, I imitated his experiments without authorization." "What?" Archmage Carlyle became more and more angry as he listened. After hearing the last word, he waved his hand, and a huge transparent palm came out, and whipped Wharton away on the spot. "Asshole. Thanks I never knew what I should change my name to reward 500 starting coins. Well, it's still 3,000 words at noon, and another 3,000 words in the evening, plus more updates, and it's all over. Please subscribe, please give me monthly tickets, please recommend votes, please give book reviews. Asking for various. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 214. Hey! Stop! Gretel almost flew out with Master Wharton. Of course, one was pulled out, and the other rushed out on his own. One fell backwards with a look of horror on his face, and the other leaned his body sideways, stretched his hands forward, and tried his best to pull. But there is always a limit to the reaction speed of human nerves. Greet rushed as hard as he could, but his outstretched fingertips were still a little short of Master Wharton. "Well." A sigh sounded out. Then, Gretel saw Master Wharton's body being blown away, slowing down, as if falling into a pile of cotton, leaning in the void in a strange posture. Well, if you don't consider your gender, it's quite enchanting. In the corner of his eye, the silver-haired magician, the great disciple of Archmage Carlyle, quietly retracted his fingers. The rest of the people rushed forward, laying hands on hands, hugging waists, trying their best to stop their teacher. "Teacher! Calm down! Calm down!" With such a buffer, Gretel finally rescued people safely. He rolled his eyelids and pressed his chest to make sure there was no fatal injury. He released the patient, turned around, and pointed at Archmage Carlyle menacingly. "Why are you beating people? Why are you beating patients? They were just cured. If only there wasn't an air cushion in the back. If someone falls directly against the wall. With such speed and impact, it would be light to break a few more bones. In the event of a brain injury, spinal fracture, or other injuries, he has nothing at hand and no treatment at all." Gretel leaned forward and tried his best to keep his eyes wide open, trying his best to prevent the other person from seeing that he was feeling guilty. Archmage Carlyle is a level 14 great magician. He is also his savior and disciplines his disciples. He really has no position to criticize others. But he finally brought the patient back. It took tracheotomy, oxygen inhalation, and a bunch of healing techniques to save him from the brink of death. After pressing the air pump for half an hour, his hands are still shaking. Greet persuaded himself in this way, trying to straighten his small body as a second-level magician and a first-level warrior. "You can scold me, but you are not allowed to hit my patients. The patient I just cured must not be beaten in front of me under any circumstances." To his surprise, Archmage Carlyle was not angry at his attitude. Instead, he let out a long sigh and threw away the arms of his disciples. Then, he dusted off the mage's robe and bowed deeply to Gretel without any warning. "Master, please stop." Gretel was so frightened that he almost jumped up. Well, if he had the attributes of a snow leopard, he might really be able to fly 3 feet in the air. He hurriedly went up to help him, but Archmage Carlyle had already stood up straight, with a face full of shame. "I'm not good at teaching. Little Greet, I'm sorry for you, but you actually taught such a student, who dares to steal other people's things casually. How can this be stolen? The content of the middle school chemistry textbook." Gretel's voice became lower and lower. Archmage Carlyle strode in front of him. He raised his hand and raised his transparent palm again, lifting his little disciple up to stand up straight. "Tell yourself. Where did you go wrong?" "I." Aurora Wharton was frightened twice in a row. She was swaying and could not stand. He glanced at the teacher quickly, lowered his head, and glanced at Greet again. His face instantly turned red and then turned pale. I violated the rules of the Magic Council. I did not get authorization or legal exchange for other people's experiments. I cannot do them secretly. The Magic Council has always been extremely strict when it comes to protecting the unique achievements of magicians, or to use a modern term, intellectual property. In the early days of ignorance, every magician cherished his unique magic broom. If he found out that someone had stolen it, he could even use legal private means to rescue him, that is, beat the other person to death. Of course, whether it can be beaten to death is a matter of another dimension. After the Magic Council was established, another set of rules was established. Magicians are encouraged to publish papers and submit their own innovative magics for other magicians to exchange for a fee. Of course, if there are legal exchange channels, there are still people who want to be sneaky. There is no need for the infringed magician to come forward, the Magic Council will hunt him down to the end. And experimental design and so on, are also part of the magician's achievements, and enjoy the same protection in the Magic Council. While Master Warden admitted his mistake intermittently, Archmage Carlyle scolded and briefly explained to Gretel. After explaining, he rubbed his temples and sighed again. Greet, just take it for my sake and don't report it to the council. I'll compensate you as much as you deserve, and I'll punish you as much as you deserve. Oro, how many contribution points do you have left? Still, there are still more than 1,500 points. Give him 1,500. Archmage Carlyle gave the order without any hesitation. He turned around and explained to Gretel. The fine imposed by the Magic Council for this kind of behavior is usually 10 times the normal exchange price. I can't estimate the value of your experiment. I only know that it is certainly not low, but this guy only has 1,500. If you think it's not enough, I'll turn back. Phil. No need, Greet stopped him in a low voice. Master Carlyle has turned to his disciple. As for you, leave the Mage Tower now, immediately. Take the nearest ship to the New World and stay there for 3 years. You are not allowed to come back until the time is up. Teacher. Get out. Either go to the New World for 3 years, or, from now on, don't call me teacher. This order was urgent and fast and could not be refuted. The disciples beside him were silent. Everyone looked down at their toes, and no one dared to interrupt to intercede. Aurora Warden's face was pale, beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. Finally, she bowed deeply and staggered towards the door. Wait, Gretel finally reacted. He took a step across, standing between Master Warden and the door of the room, and looked at Archmage Carlyle. Your Majesty the Archmage. I am very grateful for your intention, but there is really no need to punish you so severely. It is just an experiment, not something extraordinary. It is also a basic experiment in middle school textbooks. Gretel could accept a scolding and a couple of beatings for secretly learning something like this, but to be directly exiled for 3 years? Greet really feels that this punishment is too magical. It's not heavy at all. Archmage Carlyle shook his head solemnly. It's only been 3 years. It's better to be stationed instead of just throwing him to the front line. If the Parliament directly issued a punishment, it would only be more severe than this, and there would also be a record. In other words, Archmage Carlyle directly ordered the punishment without going through the Magic Council and without leaving a record. In the future, if the incident gets out and the punishment is passed, no one else can say anything. After Master Warden comes back, he can continue to study in the Mage Tower. As long as Gretel doesn't complain to the Magic Council, everything will be fine. Not only did he abide by the rules, but he also left room for the disciples, and he also appeased the victim. It was all in good glory, provided that the victim really agreed. The council's punishment should also consider my opinion. Gretel stood in the way of Master Warden and insisted not to let him leave. I am the one who was stolen from the experiment. I am qualified to speak. Your Excellency the Archmage, you once saved my life, and you have also taken good care of me these days. I have always been grateful to you. Your disciple learned a little. It's just an experiment, it's really nothing, there's no need to do this. Archmage Carlyle choked. All the magicians in the room saw that the teacher's dark and angry aura softened, and his face softened. It's my duty to save you, I don't need you to thank me. Punishment is also a rule, and favors cannot be used to offset it. Little Greet, if you remember my favor and don't report the matter to the council, I will be very grateful. That. When it comes to the rules of the council, Gretel really can't beat the other party. After all, he is only a second-level mage, and as for the other party, a 14th-level great magician is qualified to enter the review meeting, and there is no need to modify a few unimportant rules. Next words. But, this is too much. Gretel looked around subconsciously. Master Warden looked at him helplessly, with a pleading look on his face. His bright blonde hair was hanging down, and he seemed to have become a lot lighter. Of course, Gretel was not sure whether those hair strands were faded by chlorine. Beside Archmage Carlyle, the disciples stood one by one, looking at the teacher and then at Gretel, their lips opening and closing, closing and opening again. The silver-haired magician hid at the end of the crowd and raised his hand slightly to Gretel in a pleased gesture. It seems like they all want to ask me for help. Gretel scratched his hair, trying to find a way to refute the Archmage. After looking, and searching, he actually came up with an idea. What about changing the punishment? It's the same 3 years. Instead of going to the new world, how about doing something else? For example, let him work for me. I have always wanted a high-level tool man, the mage level is not high enough, so many experiments cannot be done. I do. Before Archmage Carlyle could answer, Aurora Warden couldn't wait to shout. I can do anything. Write papers, do experiments, run errands, everything. No salary. Not a penny. You still want a salary? Archmage Carlyle's face turned darker again. He looked at Gretel who was blocking the door, then at his disciple's pale face and trembling lips, frowned and rubbed his temples. The silver-haired magician took a step forward at the right moment. Teacher, Oro almost died today, and he has been taught enough lessons. Since Mr. Nordmark said so, let Oro follow him. Yes, teacher. The new world is too far away. The sea is also very rough. I heard that a ship sank last month. The disciples opened their mouths to persuade. Archmage Carlyle looked from left to right, then from right to left, and finally relaxed his brows and pointed to his young disciple. From today, 3 years, no, 5 years. Within 5 years, you will be Gretel's follower, and you can do whatever you are told. Master Warden looked like he was being pardoned, and quickly turned around and saluted Greet. Gretel reached out to help him, and when his eyes fell on Warden's face, he couldn't help but lose focus. The second follower? Can such a clean and beautiful young mage get along with Bernard? 3,000 words. Today's total is 6,000 words, and the extra updates are finally finished. Yeah. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 215. Whether follower number 2 and Bernard can get along with each other, Greet still doesn't know yet. However, he will immediately face a problem. How should he get along with Master Warden? Archmage Carlyle has walked away. As soon as the Archmage left, his disciples followed him with a roar. Only Aurora Walton and Greet were left, one facing in and the other facing out, looking at each other. 1 2 3. 3 seconds, 6 seconds, 10 seconds. Aurora suddenly woke up from a dream, jumped up, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Thank you very much. If you hadn't interceded, I would have been doomed. That place in the New World is definitely not a place for people. It will take me a month to float on the sea, and I will still get seasick. If I were kicked away by the teacher, my father would cry to death. By the way, bring me the badge. I'll transfer the contribution points to you. No need, Gretel clutched his badge. Aurora rushed a step in front of him, braked suddenly, clasped her hands in a prayer gesture, and shook them up and down. You want what you want. When the teacher finds out that I didn't transfer it to you, he can kill me on the spot. By the way, what should I call you? My lord? Your Excellency? Master? He recalled the followers of the mages around him and the various names they gave to those they followed, word by word. Greed had already shuddered fiercely. Don't. Forget it, Your Excellency, Master, etc., there is always a particularly bad association. He even jumped back reflexively. Aurora was suddenly stuck, stunned, and took 2 careful steps back. What's that called, boss? The boss is the boss. Greet compared the previous titles and felt that boss was not unacceptable. At the very least, great professors who can apply for projects and work with a group of associate professors, lecturers, PhDs, and masters are called boss by the people below. He currently has several projects. If the project of electrolytic smelting of mithril comes to fruition, he can also be named the corresponding author when publishing paper. By the way, he is also a follower. What did Bernard call him? Greet searched his memory, and the answer was rather sad. The barbarian either called his name, or said hey or hey. But correcting the barbarians is obviously better. Gretel's thoughts drifted away for a moment, and the person in front of him had already been called boss one by one. Boss, thank you for saving my life. Even if you didn't let me go to the New World, you saved 3 of my lives. Boss, I have been working with you for the past 5 years. Boss, what work do you want me to do next? Boss, why am I poisoned? Of course you will be poisoned if you smell chlorine. Greet replied subconsciously. He suddenly reacted. By the way, you can help me write a paper. How good are you at writing papers? Don't worry. I can write really well. I have published papers in Ordinary Magician's Monthly, Philosopher's Stone, and Thunder. Gretel's answer was to throw him a bunch of experimental plans. Electrolyze saturated salt water, electrolyze water, add some caustic soda, electrolyze water, add some sulfuric acid, electrolysis. If these experiments are not written clearly, those mages can electrolyze everything in their hands. At that time, the explosions and poisonings will not only benefit Black Crow Swamp, but other schools of thought will be injured and killed one by one. Do all these experiments for me. Determine the properties of the product. Write a paper. I have written down all the precautions. It is up to you to verify. If you do something wrong, it will explode. If you do something wrong, you will be poisoned. How to put out a fire. Write clearly. Yes, boss. You don't need to transfer your contribution points to me. Use them to buy experimental materials and apply for experimental equipment. Okay, boss. You must not do experiments that you are not asked to do. For example, electrolysis of caustic soda. Aurora Warden's eyes lit up. The lake-like blue eyes were shining brightly, and a touch of pink appeared on the snow-white cheeks. It looked like the brain was whirring in the skull, and the fan couldn't keep up with the heat dissipation, raising the body temperature to 1 degree. Gretel quickly waved. Forget it, come with me. Don't do experiments today. Go back and have a good rest. I will do it with you tomorrow. Emma, you really have to watch this. Electrolysis of a saturated salt water will produce chlorine at most, and if you add lime water in time, you will not cause trouble. If the caustic soda is melted and used for electrolysis, Gretel has no doubt that the flame summoned by the plastic mage can melt the caustic soda. Temperature will produce sodium. Sodium. Throw it into water and it will explode for you to see. Aurora Warden's eyes dimmed visibly. He stuffed the experimental plan back into his space bag, dejectedly, and followed Gretel out. He left the laboratory and walked out of the Tower of Babel in 3 steps. His steps became slower and slower as he walked. It was as if his whole body had been pulled out of the mage tower, and all the roots were torn off. Gretel couldn't help but look sideways. You look so reluctant to leave, you wouldn't have lived in the tower since you were a child, right? No? I'm from Berwick County. Facing Gretel's question, Aurora Warden shook her head quickly. It's not from a mage family either, my father is a viscount, and he did some small business. After making money, he sent me to learn magic. Later, he was recommended by the mage tower to come to Nevis, and later, he was accepted by the teacher. In the tower it looks like you have been here for 3 years, learning magic? It has been 5 years since you learned magic. After 5 years of study, he has stayed at the top of Igor Peak for 3 years. No wonder he looks carefree and without any scheming. Greed sighed like this, completely ignoring that he was similar to him. He had important knowledge about breaking people's heads and grabbing them, and threw it out as soon as he said it. The two of them chatted and boarded the small train, clanking, clanging, clanging all the way down to Igor Peak. As soon as it touched the ground and the sea breeze carrying the fishy smell blew, Aurora Warden was instantly resurrected with full health. By the way, how are you spending tonight? Do I want to come with you? The other followers are following the boss. Where is your home? Is it far from the station? Who is this? This is Bernard, my first follower, from the northern ice fields. Bernard, this is Aurora Warden, you will follow me in the next few years, let's get to know each other. The blonde magician froze on the spot. He raised his head, then raised his head, and then raised his head again, his cervical vertebrae creaked painfully. Hello, hello. The 3 people turned collectively, started walking towards Gretel's house. The road became narrower as we walked, and the darkness grew darker on both sides as we walked. Aurora Warden looked left and right while riding her horse for a long time, and couldn't help but ask. Boss, where are we going? Your house. Is it so remote? Yeah, we're here. Gretel dismounted. In the night, the marble sign of Gret Nordmark Biological Laboratory reflects the light on the wall and shines. Bernard. Aurora. Come on, spray the laboratory with disinfectant. Greet happily threw out 3 buckets of disinfectant. The savage shouldered the barrel without saying a word. Gretel also opened a bucket. Aurora looked left and right, and finally understood that the remaining bucket was her mission. She couldn't help but scream. I don't want it. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 216. Although Aurora Warden screamed the loudest, when she really worked, she was the most efficient. Bernard took a wooden spoon and poured water on the wall and floor, relying on the vibration of his wrist to make the disinfectant water splash as evenly as possible. Gretel carried a large watering can, and Aurora Warden. He cast a levitating spell on the disinfectant bucket, making it follow him step by step. He then directed the water flow, used a wind tornado to roll it into fine water droplets, and then used a wind-making technique to blow it away and spread it evenly on the wall. Greet had just finished spraying half a pot of disinfectant here. When he looked back, he saw that Aurora had finished the work neatly and with high quality and quantity. The masonry walls were shiny and wet, and it was obvious that the disinfectant was sprayed evenly. This efficiency is comparable to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention sending 4 people carrying large spray cans to push forward side by side for an hour. Moreover, after he finished his work, he reached out his hand automatically and consciously. "Boss, here I come." Greet. What can he do? Of course, hand over the task. Hey, as expected, in this world, mages are the primary productive force. Look at Bernard next to him. He is 2 levels higher than Aurora, and his work efficiency is not as high as Aurora's. Gretel took 2 steps back, crossed his arms, and leisurely admired the sight of the disinfectant being sprayed. Happy. The biological laboratory that is pushed through by the disinfectant spray is the correct biological laboratory. Without this thing, a biological laboratory or something would just be a bomb that could explode at any time. Aurora, great job. Keep spraying. Spray evenly. Spray the animal farm next door too. The bats are stored there. A thin mist of disinfectant filled the room. From the laboratory, to the animal enclosures, to the long swaying grass within the walls, water droplets were everywhere. So when Aurora finished her work and came over with the empty bucket, her nose wrinkled and sneezed. "Boss, are we going to sleep here tonight?" Aurora looked around with a grimace. "Here, it's not that he is too picky because he is spoiled, this place is too simple. In the walled garden, if it could be called a garden at all, the weeds had not been mown and were now taller than heads. The floor in the house is neither carpeted nor floored, and it is not even paved with marble. Looking at the texture, it is fossil into mud and turn mud into stone respectively. There were only 2 rooms that could barely be considered bedrooms. One had a single bed, and the bedding on it had a musty smell. It hadn't been exposed to the sun for who knows how long. The other didn't even have a single bed, just turn mud into stone summoned 2 stone platforms, with several wooden boards placed side by side on them. The wooden planks looked familiar, like ship planks hauled from the shipyard. Judging from the length, width, and sturdiness of the bed, it was obviously a barbarian's couch. So where does he sleep? Should I sleep on the floor in the boss's bedroom, or sleep in the same bed as a barbarian? Mosquitoes are still buzzing in the room. He doesn't want it? Greet was also a little embarrassed. To be honest, he really doesn't live here usually. He lived in the Magic Academy when he was in the training class, and then lived in the Mage Tower, the forging area, and, in short, he lived in the laboratory for a few days when the experiment was particularly busy. If you deal with it for a night occasionally, this condition is still bearable. But Aurora? A true nobleman, he has lived in the Mage Tower for 3 years. Looking at his soft silk robe and cleanly polished leather boots, he doesn't look like he can live here. Are you going to stay in a hotel? Greet asked about hotels that could match Aurora when he first came here. It seemed that the cheapest one was 1 gold coin per night. How much money does he have in his pocket? Can you afford room and board for 2 people? Let Aurora stay in a hotel while the barbarians continue to stay in the laboratory. That is so unfair and absolutely not allowed. As soon as Greet thought of this, his nose wrinkled, and sneezed too. He came to his senses and immediately walked out, calling to his 2 subordinates at the same time. "Let's go. Let's live outside. Remember, the concentration of disinfectant in the air is too high and will burn your eyes and respiratory tract. You can't stay for a long time. Lock the door and go find a place to live outside. Just pay. At worst, write a few more papers and ask the Magic Council for project funding." Anyway, he had many subjects. He later sold the method of making sodium, and then the method of making potassium. Holding half of the periodic table in his hand, he could sell it slowly, and then sell organic chemistry after it was sold out. Greet strode out. The mage's robes were flying in the night, with a majestic momentum that seemed to be able to level everything. Bernard followed without thinking, but Aurora Warden stood there, hesitated for a moment, and whispered. Old boss. I have a house here. Gretel, what? I really have a house here. I was recommended to come to Nevis, and my father bought a house here. After becoming a teacher's student, he bought a bigger one, you, me, and him. He pointed at Greet, himself, and Bernard in turn. It can definitely accommodate the three of us. There is also a maid to clean the room. There is a cook to cook. Gretel. His mood at this time was as if he saw Corey's new resident doctor taking out a bunch of keys and saying, I have 2 buildings in the community in front of the hospital. Nevis City, where the headquarters of the Magic Council is located, is equivalent to the magical capital of the kingdom. What kind of wealth is it to just buy one house after another in the capital? Anyway, Greet himself has never thought about buying a house. He didn't even think about renting one. They all rent a farmhouse to accommodate Bernard, and he can live in it as long as he can, and if he can live there for free, he can live there for free. So, now, if we go to live in the Wharton family's house collectively, is he being taken care of by his followers? Really? Really? Gretel was torn for a moment between paying to stay in the hotel and maintaining the dignity of the boss, and eating and living with followers, and finally chose to surrender to money. Money is a good thing. His little monster, who was renamed Gold Coin and is good at making various items, needs gold coins to maintain his activities. If you want a microscope, a scalpel, a retractor, or all kinds of little things, you have to fill them with gold coins. At worst, write a few more papers and let him be your second author. Greet thought viciously. A large group of 3 people, Bernard alone held half of the momentum, arrived at Master Wharton's house. Although his father was only a foreign viscount, Master Wharton's family's financial resources obviously exceeded his family's title. They walked from the suburbs to the city center, crossed the busiest commercial street, and walked into the garden area, only to see the Wharton family's house among the villas. Although the location is not the best, it is on the edge of the villa area. To buy a house in Nevis, in addition to having money, you must also have a mage level, and you cannot buy it without either, but compared to Gretna, the accommodation environment for species that use animal laboratories as residences has become one in the sky and one on the ground. And it's still a 2-story building. With a garden. In the side corner of the small building, light shines lightly from the window, illuminating the snow-white wooden fence surrounding the garden. There are vines twining on the fence, and among the green leaves, a faint fragrance wafts out in the wind. Judy. We are back, Wharton waved away his magic mount and shouted. The wooden door opened with a creak, and a maid aged 14 or 15 hurried out, rubbing her sleepy eyes. When I saw Wharton, my eyes lit up. Master. You will be back today. Who are these? She's my friend. Wharton ruffled the little maid's hair, touched her body like a magic trick, and gave her a shiny colorful candy. Seeing the little maid smile with bright eyes, Wharton also smiled and pushed her to turn around. Help us each tidy up a bedroom, the best room, and tell Aunt Susan to bring us some food. Get more. I'm hungry. The whole building suddenly came alive. In the living room and on the corridor, the lamps were quickly lit one by one. There was a commotion in the kitchen, and the fat cook in a white apron hurriedly took out a wooden tray for the boss, then put down a cane basket of white bread, a cane basket of cookies, and a plate full of sliced bacon and bacon. Cheese. That's all that's ready-made. Master, you and your friends need to fill your bellies first. The leg of lamb needs to be roasted again, and the roasted goose needs to be heated up. Master, just sit down and wait. It'll be ready in a while. There is something else needed. What? Wizard Wharton glanced at Gretel inquiringly. Gretel glanced at the barbarian and saw that he was eager to eat, as if he could eat more food, so he no longer refused. After thinking for a moment, he made a request. Is there any milk? It's so late. The cook was embarrassed. The milk is always delivered in the morning. At night, if you don't drink it all, it will go rancid. If you want to drink, my dear guest, I can go out and look for it. It's not for me, it's for him. Gretel pointed at Warden. Seeing Warden's surprised face, he added seriously. During the day. He glanced at the fat cook and didn't want to scare her by telling her about the poisoning. He just raised his finger and pointed at his throat. If you feel uncomfortable, it's best to drink some milk or goat's milk to soothe your throat. After chlorine gas poisoning, the respiratory tract and digestive tract will be burned. Drinking some milk can effectively soothe the mucous membrane of the digestive tract and play a protective role. As for healing techniques, Gretel doesn't know if the great master of the conjuration system, Archmage Galen Novak, has any healing techniques that cover the digestive tract. I'll go look for you right away. Master, just wait. The fat cook was swept out like a wind. After a moment, she shouted angrily from the kitchen across the wall. Pete! Pete! Damn old man! Come and find some milk, master wants to drink. What? I don't know where to find it? Go to someone who raises cows. Milk it now. Someone who raises sheep will do, too. The whole house was buzzing with vibrations. Warden smiled sheepishly at Gretel, and Susan is my mother's dowry, she has watched me grow up and has been cooking for me. His tone was one part warm and one part shy. Greet waved his hands carelessly. It's nothing. It's my fault. When I was in the Mage Tower, I should have thought of getting you a glass of milk. It was a mess at the time, and I didn't know where to find it. You don't know, Master Warden opened his mouth in an O shape. I seem to have heard that you lived in the tower for more than 3 months, you don't know this? How did you spend these 3 months? Gretel hee. Not only those 3 months, but also today, others brought food to him, how to eat in the Mage Tower, where to rest, he didn't know anything except what others had arranged for him. Warden raised his forehead and was speechless. He grabbed 2 slices of bread, stuffed them with bacon, cheese, and the vegetable leaves that the cook had just washed and brought them, and took a big bite. He swallowed it straight down his neck and took 2 more sips of lemonade before he was in the mood to sigh. Boss, I really want to call you boss. On the 2nd and 3rd floors of Babel Tower, every mage can eat there. You can enter with the mage badge. No money or contribution is required. But the food is average, that is, you can eat it. It's just full. Young mages below level 5 who work in the tower eat there. In addition, each school of thought and each organization, including the review committee, the editorial department of Arcana and Magic, has its own small restaurant, small bar, and so on. Some require payment, some require contribution points, and some require unified settlement by the school. Unless you're invited, it's best not to go in. Like our Thunderhorn, there is a small restaurant on the 362nd floor, and mages of the school can eat with their mage badges. You can also order food from the tower spirit with the mage badge, but if you are not ordering in batches, or if you are an archmage or above, no one will deliver the order, so you can only go down and pick up the food yourself. There is also the plastic energy tower next to it. There are free meals on the 2nd floor, gold coins are required on the 3rd floor, and contribution points are required in the restaurant on the 15th floor. Boss, just order whatever you want to eat later. Contribution points should be spent sparingly. We can afford it with gold coins. I've got it covered. Isn't it necessary? Gretel hesitated. It's not too much trouble to go downstairs to eat. Anyway, it's only a dozen or so floors down. Compared to the hospital before, ahem, the emergency department's cafeteria on the 1st floor is on the 2nd floor. There's no comparison. However, some colleagues come down from the 20th floor to eat. Don't worry, boss, this money is still affordable, Warden patted his chest confidently. No matter how expensive it is to eat at the Mage Tower, it only costs 1 gold coin a day, and only 30 gold coins a month. My family runs a wine business, which costs at least tens of thousands of gold coins a year. This amount of money is nothing. Gretel looked at him with shocked eyes. Disrespect, disrespect, local tycoon, earning tens of thousands of gold coins a year? He has traveled so far, and the gold coins in his hand have never exceeded 3 digits. But this is not the reason why he eats and lives with others. After all, he is the boss and it is his responsibility to raise followers. Gretel took a deep breath and was about to continue arguing when Master Warden already grimaced. So boss, if I am sent to the new world by my teacher, at least half of our family's business will be destroyed. Just the half of the loss will be enough for the two of us, even for him. At the other end of the long table, Bernard, who was called, had a bulging mouth and raised his head in confusion. Ah! A 4,000-word chapter, contains the first update from the new leader of the New Science Alliance. Thanks to Mr. Atchun for the reward of 100,000 starting coins for a leader. If the boss is grand, the boss will make a fortune. Thanks to Etye Mengbing for the 80,000 starting coins, plus the previous rewards, it was enough to become a leader. The boss is generous, everything goes well for the boss. 18 more, let me pay it back slowly day by day, trembling. Seeing that I have to work hard to update for most of the month, please subscribe, please give me a monthly ticket, please recommend a vote, and please give me book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 217. This is how followers and followers reach a balance. From the next day, Mr. Aurora Wharton, a 3rd-level Arcanist and 5th-level Magician, began to live a happy life of not sleeping during the day and unable to sleep at night, doing experiments during the day and writing papers at night. Mr. Wharton worked with great pleasure. Greed ignored him most of the time and was minding his own business. Except for a few words of advice when assigning tasks. Measure the weight of the gas that emits blue fire, wait, it's so light that it's almost impossible to detect and the boss's requirements are very strict. Be careful not to leak the yellow-green gas, how dare you, I've been poisoned once before. Write down all the things that will emit yellow-green gas when electrolyzed, and summarize it. 20 kinds of materials have been tried, but the boss obviously feels that it is not enough. However, Wharton occasionally wanted to do some experiments of his own, and Gretel gave him enough freedom and did not feel that he was delaying his progress. For example, this gas can be ignited and will emit blue fire? Can I use it instead of sulfur as a casting material to try the fireball spell? Okay, let's try it. Don't stay here, find a larger venue and protect it well, if possible, hire a master to help you add a barrier. Our Mr. Wharton took a senior brother down. He swiped senior brother's badge and authority, booked a spell testing room for training 5th-level magic, raised a spell barrier, and senior brother Yang set up enough armor for him. Then, hiding behind the barrier, he used his mental power to outline the spell model of the fireball spell, and touched the gas in the test tube. Boom! On the wall, in the center of the room, the spell barrier was shattered layer by layer. The senior brother slowly opened his mouth. You are doing the fireball technique, right? Yeah. Aurora Wharton's eyes widened. He looked at the crystals on the wall of the testing room, the test tube in his hand, and then the spell barrier. Teacher, senior brother, fortunately I brought you here. If he hadn't come to the high-level testing room, if there weren't layers of spell barriers, and if the fireball spell exploded, the air waves might have rolled into his face. The senior brother stared at the test tube in his hand and was too embarrassed to ask. Aurora Wharton smiled at him and ran up to the 375th floor. Rushing in front of Gretel, he was already running huffing and puffing, gasping for breath, holding his knees and saying, that fireball technique. Boom, right. Gretel asked without looking up. This word has never appeared before, but the image is so vivid that Wharton understood the meaning without even thinking about it. He took a breath and nodded vigorously. That's right. Fortunately, I listened to you. How did you know how to boom? Can I teach it to others? You go and write your paper. Okay. The author writes your name. You're the second one. Okay. Thank you. Master Wharton went about doing experiments, supplementing data, and writing papers. Whether the spell strength, spell explosion range has changed, and whether the amount of gas carried will affect the spell strength. These are all tested, which is particularly exhausting. Wow, it seems that today's entertainment time has disappeared again. The idea was just a passing thought. Only by completing all the data can I publish a good enough paper, and also be able to use it as a complete improvement magic to get enough rewards from the Parliament. However, Master Wharton knew it, Gretel also knew it, and every mage in the Magic Council knew it. In this improvement, switching to a new material is not the key. Discovering an unknown new material, trying a stable and reliable preparation method, and testing its properties are the key to everything. That's why Greed was able to get a work as a matter of course. He even let Wharton sign as the second author, which was quite generous. It's just a tool for measuring data and writing papers. Where can I find it? So Master Wharton went to work with tears in his eyes. I wrote down a bunch of data here, and just as I was about to sort it out, someone shouted again. Olo, come here and do me a favor, set up a force field barrier, okay, pump out the air, fill it with fire energy, and ignite it. Boom. It exploded again. Isn't this force field strong enough? Let's strengthen the force field barrier and try again. Boom. Strengthen it a little more, get as strong as you can. Do it again, Oro, please. This time it burned safely. The charcoal in the force field barrier swallowed white flames and was quickly burned clean. As soon as Master Wharton breathed a sigh of relief, he listened to Gretel's command. Put in more water vapor. Pour in more water. Increase the high temperature. High temperature. Boom. Well, boss, let's eat first. I ordered ham and honeydew melon, ribs in sauce, baked mushrooms and pan-fried cod. What did you say? Let's eat first. The last sentence. I ordered ham and honeydew. Honeydew melon. Yes, honeydew melon. Gretel suddenly stood up, spinning around excitedly. Buy me 2 honeydew melons. By the way, does Babel allow melons to be brought into the laboratory? It's okay to bring a few slices in occasionally, but it's best to eat them quickly. The teacher will scold you. Why do you want honeydew melon? Oops. Gretel was spinning around. Master Wharton saw his eyes shining brightly, and he opened his mouth several times and raised his hands to try to make gestures, obviously trying to explain himself. After struggling for a while, my shoulders still slumped. You'll know when I make it? I'll get lunch. I can't even understand the projects my boss is working on, and the boss thinks you can't even understand them when he explains them to you. Sad. Master Wharton was dejected and left in dismay. After a while, Gretel carried the lunchbox upstairs. Greed took a bite, took a look, took another bite, and took another look. Boss, don't be reluctant to eat honeydew melon. It's wrapped in ham. I've ordered the honeydew melon you want and will bring it to you during afternoon tea. Oh, I just forgot, in fact, we only need the melon rind. Aurora Wharton. Aren't you going to order a few honeydew melons? Otherwise, do you want me to dig through the trash can? As a result, he didn't even get a bite of the honeydew melon in the afternoon. Greed personally cut the honeydew melon into half-centimeter thick slices, placed them one by one, and set up a large array of melon rinds in the corner of the laboratory. On the shelves below the melon peel array, there are rows and rows of at least hundreds of glass dishes. "Boss, what are you doing?" I've made it and I'll show you the paper." Greet set up 2 stoves nearby, and he was cooking broth in one pot and seaweed in the other. The fragrance of the cooking was all over the corridor. Gretel's technical route is very clear. Boil broth media, boil agar media, boil various media. Cultivate bacteria such as Staphylococcus aureus and Escherichia coli in a culture medium. Then, get soil, dust, grass blades, and various other things everywhere, and put them into the culture medium to multiply and see if they can grow bigger. Ship penicillin. Of course, as the destined culture medium for propagating penicillin, melon, we must not let it go. Of course, if there is no penicillin, any streptomycin, chlortetracycline, or tetracycline will do. As for how to refine penicillin after penicillium is discovered, and how to make it into medicines, well, it will be straightened out when the ship reaches the bridge. Gretel gave this project infinite patience. Traveling back to the world before, it took Alexander Fleming at least half a year from beginning his bacterial culture experiments to discovering penicillin, not counting subsequent verification. Gretel looked at his luck index and didn't think it would be higher than Fleming. So, is it normal to spend a year or two looking for penicillin? Anyway, he got the results of the old dwarf sputum culture experiment. There were indeed a large number of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in the sputum. His treatment technique couldn't handle this thing, so he had to get a penicillin anyway. Gretel calmly conducted experiments slowly, calling Aurora for help several times a day, which seemed to consume half of his spells. Unfortunately, there was no result. The force field barrier either exploded with a bang or flickered out without any movement. He is not in a hurry, but Aurora Warden is a little impatient. "Boss, what are you planning to do? How about I find a senior brother to help?" "Well, no need, I'll think about it again, maybe the parameters are adjusted wrong. 2 people are in the same room, each doing their own thing." Wizard Warden felt that his life was back to the same place, reading books, studying magic, doing experiments, and copying scrolls. Except for the addition of a nominal boss, who must always remember to put a protective shield on him, the other rhythms have not changed at all. Oh, by the way, remember to order meals every day. Aurora Warden deeply doubted whether Gretel would starve to death in the laboratory if he was not responsible for bringing food. After half a month of experimenting, the task given by Gretel finally came to an end. After submitting the paper for review, Master Warden suddenly felt relaxed. He took stock of what he was doing and came to Gretel with an invitation. "Boss, there is a meeting tomorrow. Are you going to attend? What will happen?" Greet looked up from the microscope. "I took too long to examine microorganisms under the microscope, and the orbit of my right eye was pressed out by the eyepiece. At first glance, it looked like a one-sided giant panda." He rubbed his eyes subconsciously. The focus of his eyes had not yet been restored. For a while, he looked at everyone like they were looking at bacteria. The top is the cell, the bottom is the flagellum. Seeing this dull, out of situ look in Master Warden's eyes, he really wanted to take a pen and put a black eye on him. "One on each side, that's symmetrical, isn't it?" He showed the invitation to Greet. The annual meeting of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is a monthly magazine run by the School of Change. Every year, a group of magicians are invited to hold academic conferences. There will be many interesting gadgets for sale. If you want to find something that cannot be bought outside, or new gadgets that have just been made and haven't been priced yet, just go to this meeting. The invitation was for my senior brother. I snatched it from him and could bring 2 people in. "Boss, do you want to come with me?" Gretel hesitated. Master Warden had already taken out the invitation and waved it in front of him. "Go, go, go." There are so many interesting things at the conference, including singing dolls, metal birds that can deliver messages, and small houses that can be carried with you. You can also meet many magicians in the alchemy field. What do you want, boss? You can find someone to customize everything. Gretel was moved. Networking is indeed his shortcoming. The more magicians he knows, the easier it is to do anything, such as tissue tweezers, vascular forceps, aspirators, and precision analytical scales. Go to the annual meeting, go shopping, maybe you can find someone to do it. Anyway, the petri dish is left there. Whether you look at it or not look at it, the bacteria in it will grow or not. At 8:30 the next morning, Gretel followed Master Warden into the venue. The annual meeting of the Philosopher's Stone is not in the Tower of Babel, but on the 13th floor of the sub-tower of the Change Department. According to the time schedule on the invitation, the academic meeting will not start until 10 o'clock. Before 10 o'clock, the entire venue is in a mess, with countless magicians hawking their things. The household golem can cook, wash, and clean for you. It knows 100 kinds of recipes. It is the best choice for a single mage to travel far away. It only costs 199 contribution points. Come on, of your 100 recipes, 99 of them are sandwiches, right? Cliff Eagle eggs are for sale. You can sign a contract to become a magic pet. Another pair of eyes for the mage. Why does your egg look a little smaller? Is it really a cliff eagle? It can't be an owl, right? Purple scale stone. Purple scale stone. The one with the highest price will get it if the quantity is scarce. Let me see, let me see, let me see. Greet looked at the strange things along the way. Sure enough, he saw a demon doll that could dance and do somersaults, a pair of small drums that could resonate and transmit sound, and he also saw bundles of silver rods enchanted with eternal flame placed on the side. Greet was quite interested and stood in front of the stall, bargaining with the alchemist. I don't want it to be so long, half a finger is enough. Just keep the light directional. If it can be done, I want 60 of them, and put them evenly on the disc. The reason why the silver rod is so long is to depict the magic circle. We can cut it up to half a foot long. If it is shorter, it will require a master to make it, and the price will at least double. Do you want it? Gretel fled. Not to mention doubling the price, even at the current price, he can't afford it. A silver rod imbued with eternal flames started at 100 gold coins, and 60 would cost 6,000 gold coins. He had spent all of it and he didn't even have it. If not, why would he want to buy a shorter one? Master Warden was pulled by him to escape. After passing 17 or 8 stalls in a row, there was a sudden blockage in front of them. A large group of mages were rubbing shoulders one after another and squeezing towards a table. Let me see. Let me take a look. Hey, I really saw it. It's so big. Wow. What kind of evil spirit put the bugs here? It's so scary. Greet became curious, pulled Warden along, and squeezed in along with the crowd. Halfway through the crowd, I saw a 27 or 27-year-old mage who was very proud and frothing at the mouth, bragging to his friends. How about it? It's interesting. I bought it when I was traveling in the south. This thing is much better than a magnifying glass. It can magnify things 100 times and opens the door to a new world. We are all friends, so I brought you over to see it first. When we have a meeting later, this is the content of my speech. I won't be able to wait in line by then. Aurora Walden. He looked at Gretel, blinked, pointed at the table, and blinked again. I remember you watching this every day in the laboratory. Thanks to Etlofsway for the 500 starting coin reward. A 4,000-word chapter. Includes an extra update. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 218. Gretel looked at Wizard Wharton. Wizard Wharton looked at Gretel. One raised his eyebrows and the other blinked. 1, 2, 3, 3 seconds later, Gretel raised his index finger, pressed it directly on his lips, and made a SHH motion. Don't tell me now, it's not very kind. After the mage finishes speaking, if there is anything else he needs to add, he will tell you. Greet rubbed along with the crowd until he came to the microscope and took a look too. Tisk, the magnification is not enough. When the eyepiece is multiplied by the objective lens, the total magnification is only 70 or 80 times, certainly less than 100 times. What's more important is that without an oil lens, you cannot magnify 10 times more on the basis of the eyepiece and objective lens. At most, this is what any jeweler would do. Well, maybe he is the jeweler from Heartland City. Greet curled his lips, bored, and went to other stalls to see what was new. The flow of people slowly dispersed after passing the congestion point, doing Brownian motion between stalls, spending money, collecting money, bargaining, and arguing. The quarrel lasted until about 9:30, when suddenly a mage jumped on the table and blew a whistle. Beep. As soon as the whistle blew, the whole place was in chaos. The sellers hurriedly stuffed the goods into the space bags, and the buyers hurriedly put the money back into their pockets. They didn't want to buy or sell, just like Gretel, who was dragged toward the wall by Master Wharton. Everyone stood close to the wall, the stall table disappeared into the space bag, and the ground suddenly seemed to be burning, puff puff, puff puff, scrambling to rise upwards. Gretel looked left and right, and all the mages present looked calm, as if the scene was a matter of course. Looking at the center of the hall, the upward bulge kept changing shapes, pulling up, narrowing, stretching, extending. Soon, the table was a table, and the chairs were chairs, neatly arranged horizontally and vertically, and there was even a bulge at the front. Rostrum. So this is the system of change? The furniture you have here is not moved around, but is transformed on site for use. Gretel was so dazzled by what he saw that he thought he had walked into the wrong set and entered the world of Harry Potter. After the transformation was completed, a door suddenly opened at the front of the hall, and the big guys began to enter. The hall fell silent for a moment, and all the magicians who came early to visit the fair stopped talking and looked forward. Gretel also looked forward. The leading magician was tall, and although his hair was half brown and half white, his face was still rosy. He did not wear the traditional robes of a magician, but a short coat and trousers similar to work clothes, with the cuffs, collar, and hem all tightened. He wasn't wearing a badge, so he couldn't tell his level, but there were two magicians following him, one was level 13, the other was level 14. The old man in overalls walked in with a smile and took a seat in the center of the podium. The group of people he brought sat down, and the magicians who came to the fair walked forward in confusion, each looking for a seat. It's not like they sit randomly. Basically, those with higher grades sit in front, and those with lower grades sit in the back. They sit in rows and rows, and the hierarchy is strict. Gretel was pulled to a seat by Master Wharton. Looking around, he saw that the magicians around him were all at level 5 or 6. They were all a little surprised when they saw his badge. Then they looked at the white ring on the edge of the badge, and they instantly withdrew their surprise. Many people even smiled in a friendly way. It became quiet below. On the rostrum, the old man in work clothes coughed and spoke slowly. Thank you for attending the annual meeting held by Philosopher's Stone. In the past year, the School of Change has produced many new results, and we have taken another step forward on the road to exploring the reality of the world. For many years, alchemists have been dedicated to exploring the structure of the world, making tools based on it, and changing the world. and an in-depth understanding of the nature of the world and complex and diverse tools also make us stronger. There was applause from below. The old man blinked and raised a sly smile. Okay, that's it for the regular speech. Next, we ask all colleagues here to share with us the latest findings. The speeches at this conference will be selected together with the articles in the Philosopher's Stone last year. Innovative and most significant discoveries. And the owner of this discovery will receive a magic instrument tailor-made by the editorial department of the Philosopher's Stone that matches his level. There was a slight commotion behind Gretel. The lower-level magicians, probably the first time they came to this party, all became excited and raised their hands. The old man in work clothes chuckled and waved his hand casually. Under the rostrum, a mage sitting in the first row stood up and walked slowly onto the stage. Master Warden whispered in Gretel's ear, "How can it be possible if you want to speak at the last moment? The topics have been reviewed in advance." Oh, of course. If you want to give a report at any academic conference, you must obtain qualifications in advance. Greet expressed his understanding and listened quietly. Soon, he got a series of strange knowledge. How to control the insect-shaped golem to mine ore selection in the dark underground. A method of producing pure white stone. 3 things to note when sealing invisible servants into magic crystals to control golems. After 5 or 6 consecutive reports, the magician who showed off the microscope before the meeting finally took the stage with his new discovery. His face was full of excitement. After bowing slightly to the old man in work clothes, he couldn't wait to speak. "Dear Master, great magicians, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to introduce to you a wonderful thing, an alchemy device I discovered while traveling in the south. It can magnify extremely small things that are invisible to the naked eye. To the point where we can see clearly, it is no exaggeration to say that it opens a new door for us." Oh, the audience was excited. Even the magicians sitting on the podium turned their heads one by one and focused their eyes on the microscope. After the old man in overalls watched the demonstration in person, he even raised a light curtain himself to show the shape of the microscope to everyone. Gretel twitched the corners of his mouth slightly. This light curtain is a bit like the effect of the arcane eye, but unfortunately the accuracy is not good enough, and it is probably not good for observing small things. The magician who gave the report was still talking. More importantly, it is an alchemical tool that can be used without magic power. This means that apprentices who have not yet entered the door of magic can also use it to observe the world. This is useful for the Magic Council to train new people and allow them to they have an extremely important role in understanding the world as early as possible. One by one he pulled out various objects to be observed. Ore, crystal, cork, insect wings. They were placed on the stage in turn, and the light curtain in front of the eyepiece immediately showed the magnified appearance of these things. There was another commotion in the audience. The high-level magicians took turns leaning over the eyepiece, keeping their eyes wide open, and exclaiming oh, and that's amazing. Finally, the old man in work clothes held his hands and praised enthusiastically. "Thank you for bringing the magical alchemy equipment to the Magic Council. There is no doubt that this is the most meaningful discovery of the Philosopher's Stone in the past year, and this year's annual award should naturally belong to you. Dear colleagues, everyone is welcome to take turns to observe, and let us share the magic of the tiny world. Hey, sir, do you have any additional comments?" Aurora Walton raised her hands high. Not only did he raise his hand, he also grabbed one of Greet's hands, raised it in the air like a boxing referee, and kept shaking it around. "Thanks to Atwan Muqianzhong for the 1,500 starting coins. Everyone who uses Apple, please try your best to tip from the browser. If you tip directly with your mobile phone, Apple will take half of it," and the author received 555,555 3 months late. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 219. Before being named by the old man, Mage Aurora Walton had been arguing with Gretel for quite some time. If everyone nearby wasn't excited and their attention was drawn to the microscope, someone would definitely notice their conversation. I remember you also have one of these. Yeah. You already had it and you asked him to come up and talk about it. Oh, he's already gone up, so why bother dragging him down again? Besides, that person didn't say he invented it, he only said he discovered it in the south. But there's a prize for this. There's a prize. Don't you want that eternal flame? That, haha, I can think of a way later. It's really not good to fight with him, I have other ways to get that thing. But why did you miss out on a prize for nothing? The two men whispered shoulder to shoulder, you can't convince me, and I can't convince you. Until the old man in overalls announced the award, Aurora was anxious and raised Gretel's arm. Greet tried to struggle. However, Aurora didn't know whether it was because she was 2 years older than him, or she had secretly added wild bull power to herself, so when she grabbed him, Greet couldn't even struggle. All he could do was watch Aurora bend her arms, point at him and say loudly, "He already has this thing." There was a sudden silence in the hall. The old man in overalls looked at Aurora, at the magician whose hands he held, and then at Gretel, his rosy face becoming gloomy little by little. The magician in front of him trembled slightly with his hands, his face became visibly gray, and he whispered repeatedly, "I said I found it, I didn't say I did it, I said I met it in the south." The old man in overalls was silent. After a moment, he let go of the opponent's hands, turned to the audience, and coughed majestically. "What's your name? Who is the teacher?" "I am Aurora Wharton, and my teacher is Archmage Carlyle," Aurora answered smoothly. The old man in work clothes nodded slightly, his expression a little kinder. "It turns out he is a disciple of Carlyle. I understand that you want to protect your friends, but the object of our conference's reward is the behavior of magicians to widely share knowledge with their companions. Although your friend has already had this." He gently tapped the microscope under his hand. "However, he has never submitted it to the Philosopher's Stone. Therefore, it is impossible to give him this reward." Aurora was stuck. He turned to look at Gretel, his face turning red and white, his lips opening and closing like a golden red koi being lifted out of the water. Greet had no choice but to take a step forward to block him, and bowed slightly to the old man in work clothes. "Thank you, master, for your reminder, and also thank this gentleman for his enthusiastic promotion of microscopes. As for what Aurora just said, I would like to add something dash." He put his hand on his waist, took out a stack of papers from the space bag, and held it in both hands. "I made this microscope last July in order to curb the plague. In February this year, I have written a paper on its use and submitted it to the Magic Review Department together with the actual object. As for not submitting a manuscript to the Philosopher's Stone, no, for bringing this to the attention of all the masters, I can only say, I am very sorry." He raised his hands and gave them gently. The old man in work clothes frowned slightly, and with a movement of his fingers, a pair of transparent mage hands took the paper and sent it directly to him. There are 2 lines of large characters on the cover, the ink is thick and clear, and it is still clear after several months. Several records of using homemade microscopes to observe onion skins, cork, meat, bees and other insects. There is a note tucked inside the title page. For this paper, the reward given by the Parliament is 1 research point and 1 contribution point. There is also a later article record of observing Shigella with a homemade microscope, which is also 1 research point and 1 contribution point. The old man raised his thick eyebrows and was about to get angry. Who reviewed these two papers? What bastard is so ignorant? Is such an important invention that can open the door to a new world for magicians worth this reward? No wonder people don't dare to submit articles. It's strange that they dare to submit articles. Who would think that such a comforting reward could be published in a journal? But now is not the time to rush to the magic review department and slam the table to hold people accountable. The old man in overalls quickly flipped through the paper and confirmed the originality of the microscope. He immediately smiled at Greet and waved him up. So, do you have anything else to share about this, the microscope? Yes, Gretel walked up briskly, and the magicians spontaneously turned aside to make way for him to open a wide path. Greet sat on the stage and began to operate the microscope skillfully. At the same time, he took out things from the space bag. First of all, I want to explain that it is not the best way to put the objects to be observed directly on the stage. Because the objects will be uneven and cannot be well focused, the best observation results will not be achieved. I usually sandwich it between two pieces of glass. The lower one is thick and solid, called a slide, and the upper one is more transparent and thinner, called a cover glass. It is best to have a constant light source under the stage. This way you can see it more clearly. In addition to relying on the objective lens and eyepiece to magnify, there is another way to drop a drop of oil on the cover glass. Using the shape and refraction of the oil drop itself, the specimen can be magnified by 2 to 10 times. It is best for the oil drop to be clear, transparent, with good refractive index. I used refined olive oil. It is said that cedar oil has the best effect, but I didn't buy it. The principle of a microscope is that the magnified real image of the first lens must fall within the focal length of the second lens. So the calculation of the focal length is very important. If you can find a good enough craftsman, the objective lens part can be made into a turntable, and several objective lenses can be rotated back and forth. With the eyepieces that can be raised and lowered, objects can be observed at different magnifications. The jewelry maker I found at the beginning has average skills, so I only made this tube. There are many ways to increase the magnification and allow users to see more clearly. One is to grind better lenses to make the convex lens have a higher magnification. Of course, it is also possible to use magic to magnify and replace the grinding of the lenses. The second is to improve the polishing accuracy of the inner wall of the lens barrel to make the inner wall bright enough so that things will not be blurred when seeing. The third is to seal the lens barrel, and if possible, fill it with gas that is stable and non-combustible to prevent dust from entering and condensation of water vapor inside. If there is a strong enough light source and the quality of the convex lens is good enough, a light shield can be installed in the center of the condenser so that the illumination light does not directly enter the objective lens, and only the light reflected and diffracted by the specimen is allowed to enter the objective lens. In this case, the magnification can significantly improve. Before observing the specimens, they should be stained. I have written about the staining methods and chemicals separately in the paper, but there is still a need for further research and development. Greet kept talking one by one. On the rostrum, the magician who originally introduced the microscope became more and more uneasy as he listened, and finally began to move toward the audience with a rustle. His face was flushed, and even the Mediterranean Sea, which was not covered by his sparse hair, was blushing. He lowered his head and walked down. He was hunched over, the hem of his robe was dragging the floor, and he seemed to be slumping. Gretel couldn't bear to look at this pitiful look, it was so miserable. If he hadn't appeared by chance, he would have been able to get the reward and turn over smoothly. No one reached out to stop him. No one spoke up to stop it. Even the old man in work clothes who initially praised him and said that this award should be given to him only looked at him with pity. Gretel's eyes fell on him from time to time, and suddenly he took 2 quick steps and grabbed the unlucky bald magician. Actually, you don't have to go down. The bald magician suddenly raised his head, his face full of surprise, and he subconsciously took a step back. Greet stopped looking at him, stretched out his hand to stop him, and looked at the old man in work clothes on the rostrum. As you said, Master, what this conference rewards is the act of sharing discoveries. This gentleman. Having said this, he tried his best to drag the balding magician and turned him towards the rostrum. The act of promoting the microscope actually achieved a very good sharing effect. And he also claimed before that he discovered this instrument rather than invented it. So, there is no need to deprive him of it just because I am here. It's a deserved honor. But you. The bald magician's lips trembled. The reward that was about to be obtained was in vain, but the owner of the invention spoke for himself. Ups and downs, he wanted to refuse and thank you, but he didn't know what to say. In the middle of the venue, Aurora Wharton had already shouted urgently. Hey, you! Greet turned back with a smile and waved his hand to his followers. There was silence in the venue. The magicians in front, left, and right, and the big guys on the stage all focused their attention on Gretel. Half of the people, especially the older and poorly dressed magicians, looked at Gretel with admiration. The other half, mainly young and energetic magicians, looked sideways, with expressions on their faces as if they were being taken advantage of. Aurora Wharton even heard someone whispering behind her. Is this guy stupid? Do you want to give away everything you get? Why leave it to someone else? That guy is old, poor, and has no potential. It would be useless to conquer him, right? Aurora Wharton turned her head back and glared. He immediately turned to Gretel, stretched his neck as hard as he could and almost climbed onto the chair. Why did you let him do it? Don't you still want that dash? Aura! Gretel shouted to stop. He pushed the bald magician forcefully and asked him to take 2 steps forward, while he turned sideways to make way for him. The old man in overalls kept looking at him with soft eyes, neither approving nor stopping him. It wasn't until the two were at loggerheads that he stood up with a smile. You. Having said this, he quickly lowered his eyes and glanced at the cover of the paper with his peripheral vision. Gretel Nordmark, are you saying that you want to give up the annual award for the Philosopher's Stone to this magician? I abide by the rules and respect the judgment of the masters, Gretel replied. The old man smiled even deeper. Even if you don't get the prize in the end. Even if you don't win the prize, Gretel was extremely calm. A piece of magic equipment is nothing. If he follows his plan, what he can get is far more than just a piece of equipment. Very good, the old man clapped his hands thickly and nodded calmly. Then I now declare that, given that this gentleman was the original promoter of the microscope and his work has had a huge impact, this year's award for the Philosopher's Stone will be won by him. He reached out his hand. The bald magician froze on the spot. Under his sparse hair, the Mediterranean Sea turned red for an instant. There was a slight commotion in the venue. Some people were envious of the man's good luck, while others couldn't help but point their fingers and mutter that Gretel was really a fool. Master Wharton couldn't help shouting, looked at the old man, and collapsed helplessly. Well. Can't bear it. Nothing but tenacity. The opponent's level is too high. My teammates, no, my boss is too slow and will give away everything he gets. However, his sigh was stuck halfway. On the rostrum, the old man smiled again and raised his hand to greet. Then, Mr. Gretel Nordmark, are you willing to publish your paper in the Philosopher's Stone and authorize your invention to be produced and improved by the Alchemical Society? Aurora Wharton froze in place. He turned his head one by one like a zombie, looking at Greet's calm smiling face, and his cervical vertebrae cracked in his neck. Known, by promoting this achievement, you can get an award from the alchemy branch and get a customized magic tool that matches your level. Known, the rewards that result creators receive should not be lower than those of promoters in any case. Question: how much should the creator get? Thanks to Atwan Mujianzhong for the 2000 starting coins, and thanks to the boss for going to the browser to reward. 3,600 words. Let's count 3,000 words. I'll add another 3,000 words to one chapter in the evening. I've completed another update today. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 220. Chapter 220. No one can try to trick me, Gretel Nordmark. Mr. Chun, leader of the Alliance, adds 3 updates. Mr. Gretel Nordmark is responsible for providing microscope design plans, usage suggestions, and ideas for improvement. The Alchemy Guild enjoys exclusive production and sales rights. It can authorize others to distribute. The Alchemy Guild's payment to Mr. Gretel Nordmark is. In the conference room, the two sides sat across the long table, assuming a negotiating posture. The old man in overalls dictated one by one, while a 13th level great magician who was also a gentleman qualified to enter the judging panel sat on his right with his hands clasped together. There is a quill standing vertically on the notebook in front of you, automatically recording each item one by one. After remembering this, the silver-white quill suddenly paused and stopped on the last circle. The old man in work clothes raised his head with a smile. "Greet, how many do you want?" Gretel gave him a confused look. He doesn't know how much the patent licensing fee should be. In fact, as a former clinician, he is more exposed to end products rather than front-end patents. Of course, as a highly sophisticated technology in the world, the patent premium for microscopes must be huge. For example, when a coronary stent first entered the market, it cost tens of thousands of yuan per piece. However, after the patent period expires and a large number of copies are made, the price can even drop to 700 yuan per piece. There is no doubt that the patent premium accounts for a large part of the price difference. But how much does a microscope cost? How much does it cost? How many units can be sold annually? How much is high-end, how much is mid-range, and how much is low-end? Also, when the Alchemy Guild encountered similar cases in the past, how were they divided among the magicians? Gretel doesn't know anything. There is no source of information, so what can he use to negotiate the price? "How much do you plan to give here?" He threw the ball back. The old man in overalls did not speak. To his left, an 11th level great magician turned over a page of information and said with a kind smile, "I just asked the gentleman who just won the award. The price for purchasing this microscope is 500 gold coins. Considering the cost of the lens and labor, the Alchemy Guild can produce it in batches and can reduce the cost to about 300 gold coins. The profit is split in half. Can the Alchemy Guild pay 100 gold coins for each microscope? The profit is split in half, which sounds quite generous as a licensing fee. In particular, this is only the profit after deducting direct production costs. Marketing, transportation, management costs, and other messy things are not included in it at all. It seems that the Alchemy Guild plans to cover it directly. And each one costs 100 gold coins. In other words, as long as 60 microscopes are sold, the reward from the Alchemy Guild is enough for Gretel to buy the Eternal Flame. Is it difficult to sell 60 aircraft? Aurora Wharton touched her pocket and felt that it was not a big deal to buy one for herself and persuade her teachers and senior brothers and sisters to each buy one. There are also those magicians who have reached level 5 under senior brothers and sisters. Whatever you want, you can go out and have 20 or 30 fights. He looked happy, glanced at Greet secretly, moved his elbow to poke him secretly. Gretel did not agree immediately. He pondered for a moment and asked sincerely, "Besides this tube-like microscope, what about other models? What about magnifications as high as 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times? What about the one with the light source underneath? There are 3 objective lenses at the bottom. Are they driven by a turntable? What if the two eyepieces are side by side and the two eyes look at the same time? Is the lens barrel sealed and filled with protective gas? How much do you plan to sell for those models? This. Aurora Warden froze. The great magician also froze. He thought for a moment, sighed, and began to vomit bitterness with a deep face. Mr. Nordmark, we also have plans to make these models you mentioned. But no one has ever done these things. We need to summon the best craftsmen and alchemists with expertise in item production to work together. Research. But research takes time and costs, and the specific pricing after production has yet to be studied. In other words, high-end microscopes will not be sold so cheaply. At that time, the commission will still be 100 gold coins per game, so it will be a loss. Aurora Warden finally reacted, clenched her fists, and quickly became serious again. He tried not to reveal his emotions, but Greet smiled sincerely, leaned forward slightly, and asked. Also, are high-level microscopes also traded with gold coins? Or are they traded with contribution points? At this point, the old man in work clothes had to cough and cast a reproachful look to his left. High-level microscopes are more suitable for major mage towers and high-level mage. In that scenario, most transactions are done with contribution points, and there are very few exceptions. The problem is that the exchange of contribution points and gold coins is 1:1 at the official price of the Magic Council, but the black market price can be 1:4 or even 1:5. Using gold coins to pay licensing fees is a blatant trick. The old man originally planned to ask his subordinates to negotiate a relatively low price, and then he would come forward to give some benefits, such as a good magic equipment, and make the other party read better. As a result, my subordinate pretended to be generous and lowered the price. The other party smiled gently and sincerely, but secretly pointed out the traps one by one. This is not easy to talk about. The old man can only stand up for himself. He sent the guy on his left out first, and asked someone to change the tea and serve snacks. After a long round of tossing, I saw that the atmosphere in the conference room had relaxed a bit, and then I threw the ball back. So Greet, how many do you want? I really don't understand this. Gretel looked at him sincerely. Master, look, I don't understand the production cost, selling price, or sales volume at all. If you are not in a hurry dash. He paused and turned to look at his followers. Oro, can you please introduce me to your teacher? That must be no problem. Teacher loves me the most. Aurora Warden tried her best to puff up her chest and make herself look more reliable. The eyes of the old man in work clothes changed slightly, and he asked casually. He's your friend? No, I am his follower. Master Warden replied carelessly. After hanging out with Gretel for half a month, I no longer feel embarrassed to say this. Well, as long as I am thick-skinned enough, others will be embarrassed. The old man was surprised. Just as he was about to say something, a young mage came in with his head lowered and quickly handed him a page of paper. The paper was filled with Gretel's resume, submitted results, and projects submitted to the Magic Council. They were written from the top to the bottom, with not a single line of space left. The old man read 10 lines at a glance, watching the eyes of the two people change again and again, and finally sighed to Aurora Warden. Your teacher is really kind to you. With Gretel's ability and character, he was able to recruit his disciples as followers when he was still a second-level mage. Thick-skinned, decisive in his actions, and well-intentioned, the Archmage Carlyle, who was just a familiar face and had not had many interactions with him, was a character. That's Master Warden held his head high and looked matter-of-fact. You don't understand what I am praising. The old man suddenly didn't want to talk to this guy. He turned to Gretel, touched his beard, and smiled kindly. Greet, there are generally several ways for magicians to authorize the Alchemy Guild to produce their own products. Listen to it and decide which one you think is appropriate, we will choose which one. One is that the Alchemy Guild gives a sum of money to buy it out in one go. Of course, this is mainly applicable to relatively simple results without subsequent improvements. One is to share the profit according to the profit ratio, with the magician getting between 30% and 50%. One is to share according to the sales amount. Of course, because including the cost, the magician's share ratio will not be that high, mostly 10% to 15%. Considering the importance of this microscope, I can give you up to the upper limit of the share. Of course, I will also give you magic equipment, so you won't be at a disadvantage compared to the one who got the reward. He finally made a long note and looked at Gretel eagerly, waiting for him to make a choice. Well, no matter which way you choose, the Alchemist Guild will make money. In fact, half the profit or 15% of the sales is not the upper limit. For some products with particularly low cost and high profit margin, it can even reach 2/3 of the profit or 1/4 of the sales volume. For example, some worldly luxuries. But Gretel is a low-level mage after all. Even if there is a faint shadow of legend behind him, he is still a low-level mage. The upper limit of the usual proportion is already very generous. 20% of sales. Give me a free sample of each model, Gretel answered without hesitation. Who can control the profits? Material procurement, labor costs, marketing, discounts, all calculated, the reconciliation will be tiring to death. Well, in fact, he only wants a high-precision microscope, anything he divides into parts is just an add-on. More or less is not a big problem. The only real thing is not to involve his energy. The old man opened his mouth to refute. Gretel has raised a finger. Most of the processes involved in making microscopes can be completed by ordinary people. In other words, as long as we hire more jewelers, we can increase production. Moreover, the more high-end the model, the higher the profit. I can provide for technical guidance. We can also publish papers to provide as many application scenarios as possible. Application scenario. The old man chewed on this new word. He propped his chin up on his calloused tiger's mouth, his eyes flashing. For example. For example, the necromancy school. Gretel smiled. Believe me, even if they just buy 10 or 20 microscopes just to see the truth about the plague, they can pay for it with their eyes closed. For details, you can read the paper on dysentery and the source of the plague that is similar to it. I can provide more than 10 kinds. He took out the stack of papers again and slid them along the table. The old man squinted his eyes and read it once, then quickly glanced at the resume next to him, then raised his head and looked at Greet carefully. More than 10 sources of plague. No problem. Can you publish a paper? It's a joke. Well, you have to pay for the experimental expenses, such as buying dyes and experimental animals. It's the same thing to distinguish 10 kinds of pathogenic bacteria under a microscope. The old man laughed happily. The wrinkles on his face opened one by one, and deep in the wrinkles, it seemed as if magic crystal powder was falling. So, deal. Make a deal. Snapped. The two palms hit each other and the sound was crisp. The old man got up and walked to the wall, took out a large piece of paper and spread it on the table. Then, let's take a look at what the magic instrument you want looks like. Guess what Greet got in the end? 3,200 words. In addition to the 3006 at noon, there is another extra update today. There are 800 more words left. Book Club Group number 649136249, welcome to chat together. Please subscribe, please give me a monthly pass, please recommend me a vote, please give me a book review.